Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another Tuesday Cruiser Chat with OTram. Hopefully, we'll keep power and internet. Um, we've got crazy thunderstorms rolling through this afternoon. Uh, so yeah, hopefully, hopefully power and internet stay on. For some reason, it's coming through really fuzzy on my end where I'm watching. Trying to think what's new. We got a new lift installed in the new side of the shop last week. So that's exciting. And we got the 3FE 5-speed FJ40 um, up and running and drove it for the first time today. So that was super exciting. And David says it's hard to hear me today. Yeah, I'm guessing the internet is wonky. Because it was just really blurry and pixelated on my screen. Let me go back to the thing. So, still no sound? Um, yeah, I'm not sure because everything's set the way it normally is. Let me see. Okay. I'm guessing it's an internet, something funky going on because I didn't change any settings. So hopefully that doesn't keep happening through chat. But anyway, we got a new lift installed in the backside of the shop last week, so that's exciting. And we took the 3FE 5-speed swapped 40 for its first drive around the parking lot today. I've still got to do a lot of like polishing up of systems, but it was good to have it move under its own power and everything work. OTram is from when I very first started the business. I was mobile. Like I had a van full of tools and I drove to people's houses and worked on cars and trucks there. So it's on the road again, mobile mechanic. And then we moved into a shop about 3 years ago. And I was too lazy to change all the paperwork. So I just shortened it up to the acronym. So I guess legally it's still on the road again, mobile mechanic. But everybody just calls it OTram. And yeah, I was super excited doing a happy dance when Danny drove the 40 out of the shop. I mean, we only drove it out of the shop around the next door building and then over onto the tall lift. But it was great to have it move under its own power. So yeah, now I just got to finish building the exhaust for it. Yeah, I mean, we can do valve cover gasket, oil pan gasket, rear main seal on a 3FE. Not a problem. We're fairly slammed on the schedule right now. I would guess I'm 6 weeks to 2 months out at this point, based on what's already booked and what's in the lot. But yeah, we can do that. And I've never been called to do a trail side repair on a trail ride that I wasn't already on. Well, I take that back. I've been called to bring parts to a trail. I've done plenty of fixes trail side, but they were all rides I was already on or in camp. I don't know that my Subaru is going to get very far down the trail to do trail repairs. I need to get the Shady 80 up and running. And then I could take that and I could go do trail saves. Awesome. Marcel with the donation. That is very cool. I always forget that function even exists. I turned it on forever ago, but nobody ever uses it. I thought everybody knew I had an 80. Yes, I have the world's worst well, technically it's an LX450. I have the world's worst 97 LX450. It's terrible, and I'm slowly in the process of bringing it back to life. And awesome that the weld-on nuts method worked for you on the oil pump. That's the best way that I've found to get them off when they're stripped out. Manuel says he just got a 1FZ short block for his 80 series. Unfortunately, after I put it all together, discovered that the new block doesn't have a crank sensor. At least on the 80s I've seen, the crank sensor slides onto the crank. Like it's a keyed on piece. So you can just use the one from your old engine. I've got a 1FZ short block sitting in a box in the shop, but I haven't actually taken it out to fully look at it. We're going to pull it out and put it on the stand in the morning because we've got a 1FZ to build, and we're going to start cleaning and swapping parts. But the crank sensor wheel slides on and keys on there, just like the timing chain sprockets do. And then the sensor itself is bolted in the oil pan. What do I think about the swap to 1HD or FT? I've never looked into what it actually takes to do that swap. We don't have a ton of diesel cruisers. Well, I guess in the US there's not a ton, and there's even fewer locally. I've only had, I think, 2 1HD TFT trucks come through the shop. Manuel, where are you at? Because on ours, the crank sensor, I mean, it slides onto the crank, and then the sensor itself goes in the oil pump, or in the oil pan, so you'd be swapping your oil pan over. So I don't know. I'm not sure. And yeah, to Steven, I think a 4.7 motor conversion would be awesome. It'd be a ton of work. It's been done, but a very cool conversion. And I want to say the 1FZ short block was right around $4,000. Like 4,200, somewhere in that ballpark. I could be wrong, but it wasn't terrible. And High Camp, how minor is the pitting on number 6, and how close is it to where the fire ring, like where the steel ring on the head gasket lines up? My machinist always told me if you can feel it with your fingernail, it's too much. We had one, I guess last year, that had pitting on number 1. And I sent my machinist a bunch of pictures, and he was like, yeah, I wouldn't chance it. So we ended up pulling the block, taking all the pistons, crankshaft, stripping it down, and sending it to him to have the deck machined to get the pitting out. That's the only one I've had that's had pitting bad enough to not reuse or not to not have machine work done. And to David, as far as I've gotten with the ring cam is opening up the box and looking at it. The light that's mounted by the front door of the shop, the exterior light, is super ghetto. Is a super ghetto box to mount it. So I haven't gone through taking the box off the wall and redoing it properly. Very cool. I always like hill climbing videos. I'll have to check that out. And yeah, it's the price of the new Toyota short block isn't hateful. Like I want to say, new short block, timing cover, water pump, parts, timing parts, all the gaskets and machining the head and labor. It ends up being like 10 grand, and you've basically got a new motor, which isn't bad. An oil analysis could probably help predict future problems. I've never actually gone through the process of having an oil analysis done on anything, so I don't know the ins and outs. I've got a couple of customers that have done it, and it's funny. We had a guy, a true barn find 40, and it had like no oil pan on it, no carb, no ignition when he bought it. And he was like, hey, get it running. So we, put an oil pan on it, ignition, carb, got it all running. He drove it like 100 miles, sent some oil out to Blackstone Labs, drove it, like another 50 or 60 miles, and it threw a bearing in the engine. And like the same day he threw the bearing, he got the analysis back from Blackstone, and they were like, yeah, you've got bearing failure, imminent. There's a lot of aluminum in your oil, which, I mean, his was bad. Like there was like just shaved off pieces of bearing in the oil pan when we got it back. I guess they shouldn't let motors sit open for 15 years and then fire them up. We actually just got done putting a used motor back in his truck. I think the 93, 94 1FZ didn't have the crank sensor, but I'm not entirely certain because I've never looked into it in depth. On the 95 to 97, I know it's got a crank sensor, and you definitely have to have that because that's where the computer, calculates where the piston is and where to do spark timing. So I think, like Lee says, the earlier ones did not. You'd have to have the wiring harness, the other sensors, the computer, everything for 93, 94. Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. You've got to have the trigger wheel that slides onto the crank. I have not seen oil going into the cooling system on a head gasket. I actually haven't seen it in person on any of the trucks we've done. But if the oil cooler is leaking, the oil cooler can push oil into the coolant because the oil pressure is higher than cooling system pressure. So you might look at the oil cooler. It's down on the passenger side of the block, kind of in front of or behind the lower exhaust manifold, front exhaust manifold. Well, it's been a long day. The fuel induction system flush, most of the time, like, it's referred to as a wallet flush. You may see some benefit from it. Likely you won't. It's one of those things. There's no real reason to clean the fuel injectors or clean the, any of that unless you have a problem that you're chasing. If you're chasing a misfire and it's not spark related, then there's a chance that it could be an injector or something. But I'm going brain dead. But yeah, most of the time it's easy money. It's easy money for the dealership. They just hook up their flush machine and do their flush, but it really doesn't do anything that's going to benefit you. And on the used motor that we did, basically we just resealed everything, valve cover gasket, timing cover gasket, tappet cover, oil pan, front and rear main seals. We just did all the external gaskets. We didn't bolt the head on either of them that we've done lately. Just to reseal so that once we put it all together, we don't have to mess with it in the truck. And the oil cooler, I've never actually done it in the truck. I've only done it while I was swapping engines, but it's not horrible. You'd probably have to pop the, I'm going brain dead again, the front exhaust manifold off to get to it. But if you have the full gasket kit, then you've got the gaskets for it in there. I'm trying to think. I think it's just a round of like 12 millimeter headed bolts. And then the cover comes off. And then there's some big copper gaskets inside. But it's been a couple of years since I messed with one. But I don't remember it being bad. We got a rebuilt motor from... oh no, I'm going brain dead. We got a rebuilt motor and it didn't have the oil cooler on it, so we had to swap it from the old motor. So we had to reseal that one. But I don't remember it being a bad job. On a 3FE, the rear main doesn't really cross over with anything else. It's just the rear main seal. Like, you could do the oil pan while you were in there. You'd maybe have a little bit better access to it. But mostly just the rear main seal. And I have definitely done the push the seal in a little further to try to miss a groove in a crank. And to Art, I'm guessing that my internet connection is really bad. It's coming through fine on my end now, but earlier in the video, it was really choppy from what I could see. We're having really bad thunderstorms here right now. So I'm guessing it's an internet connection issue. Looking at a 93 Land Cruiser with a bad transfer case. It has the locking rear diffs and full floating rear axle. What would I pay for it? It depends on mileage and what kind of condition the rest of the truck is in. I'm generally, if something's got a big problem with it, like a head gasket, a blown transfer case, a busted axle, something like that, you're going to have to put a good chunk of money into, and the person that's selling it hasn't bothered fixing it. $1,500, $2,500, depending on condition. But it's really hard to say. The 93, 94s are probably pulling a little bit less money than like a 95 to 97. So that plus a bad T case, yeah, probably 1,500, 2,500, somewhere in there. I guess, it also depends on where you are geographically. Because some areas of the country, cruisers are a lot cheaper than others. To remove all the oil on the undercarriage, we'll either use, just like the foaming engine bright oil soak and a power washer, or we got like a foaming. It's like an attachment that goes on the end of the power washer that foams soap, and we put Simple Green, either Simple Green or Purple Power in that, and hose down the whole undercarriage with that, and then go back with the regular power washer and power washed it all off. We had I think it was a 96 or 97 through a couple of weeks ago that had such massive oil leaks that the spare tire was dripping oil. I think we ended up power washing that one 2 or 3 times, trying to get it cleaned off before we worked on it. But Crash is usually the one that does the pre-cleaning at the shop, because I always forget until I'm up to my elbows in grease and grime that, oh, I should have cleaned this before I pulled it in. He's much more about working clean, so he's the one that usually pre-cleans. How often should you replace the M-shaped pad spring on the calipers? I've never replaced one for wear. I've only replaced them for them being like flat out missing. And even like a lot of the trucks that come through, it's missing and you never would notice it. It basically just keeps the pads from rattling. But, after a while, they stick on the pins anyway. So it doesn't seem to do a ton. But, if it doesn't feel like it's doing much, usually the aftermarket caliper kits, come with the pins and stuff, have that spring in them for pretty cheap. So it'd be cheap just to replace it. Yeah, the one we had that was dumping oil all the way back to the spare tire, there's an O-ring that goes between the timing cover and the block. So like where the oil pump pumps into the block, that one was leaking, and it was just spraying out the side of the timing cover. It was terrible. Yeah, I think like 90% of people must forget to put those springs back in, because we almost never see them still on trucks. Unless it's like a super pristine truck, half the time we don't even bother with them. I have absolutely no experience with the Wits and replacement brass oil pump bushing. I've never come across knowing that bushing was worn in a truck. Like, I've never seen symptoms of a worn bushing. And I've only had the timing cover off of 2 trucks so far. Well, I guess 3. To where you would actually get to that bushing. So I haven't ever actually messed with one. And we just did the really expensive method of getting that new bushing by buying a whole Toyota short block, because it comes with it. Everything Joey sells is super awesome. Like, I've never gotten a bad part from Joey. So I would imagine, just based on that it's an excellent product. because he vets everything and is super meticulous. So yeah, just based on that, I would assume it's a good product, but I've never actually used it. I would bring extra fuel filters, and I would also bring extra socks for the pickup in the fuel tank. Like where the fuel pump sits, there's a little sock that comes out from under it that's like a pre-strainer. Uh, it's a pre-strainer type deal, and if you've got lots of crap in the fuel, that's going to be the first line of defense. So I'd probably bring a couple of those in case they get clogged up. Yeah, and I think that's why Land Tank originally developed that bushing, was because if you hot tank the block, it ruins that bushing. We haven't gone through having a machine shop rebuild a 1FC. We've just, I guess the only time we've sent a 1FC block to the machine shop was to have them deck the head. And I completely stripped the block before they decked it, but we didn't have them hot tank it for that reason. And we just cleaned everything really well with oil passage brushes and compressed air. But yeah, if you hot tank the block, you're definitely going to need that bushing. Yeah, if I had an unlimited budget, there is so much stuff at Wit's End that would be on my truck. Starting with the turbo kit, which we just got a Cometic all-metal head gasket and ARP studs for an engine build that's coming in probably in a month or two. That's getting one of Joey's turbo kits. So that'll be a lot of fun. I've never measured how long vacuum should hold on the brake booster and how many pumps until it goes away. On the 100 series, I know on the electric booster with the accumulator, you get between 35 and 40 pumps before boost goes away. On the 80 series, I would guess 5 or 6 pumps. It's not going to be many. And as far as how long how long it would hold, it depends on how well your check valve is or how good your check valve is. But I would guess, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. I wouldn't expect it to hold much longer than that. They might, but I've never actually played with it to see. I also would like an OTRAM credit card. And to Jason, thanks for the thanks. Yeah, the videos are a lot of fun to make. I haven't put out a ton of how-to videos lately. We haven't had anything like new and exciting come through the shop to video. If everything's like the same jobs over and over again. And yes, I definitely plan on filming the Wit's End turbo install. And it should make for a decent video because we're also doing an engine rebuild with that one. So it'll be new Toyota short block. We'll have the whole engine out on the stand. So I'm hoping I can do most of the fit up of all the new turbo stuff with the engine out of the truck, which will make it easy to shoot video on and then drop it in. We don't have a lot of 3FE trucks coming through. We've got, a couple of customers with 60s. or 62s and a couple of early 80s, but we don't see very many of them. I just put a 3FE in a 40 and drove it for the first time today. But I didn't shoot much video of it. There's a quick video clip of it on our Instagram today, driving through the parking lot. For 80 series brake booster master cylinder, I like the ASIN stuff for the master cylinders. It's basically the same as what the factory Toyota stuff was. ASIN made the factory one. And for the booster, it's like Seiken. It's Seiken. And I get those from Cruiser Yard down in Texas. And the Vicken, I don't think I've ever seen an 80 series master leak into the booster, but on the earlier stuff, not extremely common, but we see it once or twice a year. And right now there is no ETA on the turbo video. It depends. I mean, it all depends on when. So my customer, I guess, was one of the early guys in on the turbo kit, but I think he's still several batches deep. Like he's not one of the upfront people. So it just depends on when Joey gets down to him on the list for actually shipping a turbo. I would guess a couple of months still. We've got most of the engine parts at the shop to start building the motor, but I don't think the truck's actually coming down. I think he's in Delaware. I don't think the truck's coming down from Delaware until the turbo kit comes. On a cruiser, well, any 4-wheel drive, you've got to change the ring and pinion in both ends. You can't do just one end. And especially on something full-time 4-wheel drive, like an 80 series, if you only change one end, you're going to smoke the center diff in really quick order because you'd be spinning the inputs at 2 different speeds. So yeah, you have to change both ends. I don't know that I've ever seen a Land Cruiser Heaven seat cover set in person. We've had trucks come through that had new leather in them, but I don't know if it was Land Cruiser Heaven or the older Metric TLC stuff, or if it was somebody else's. Nobody's ever said, hey, this is my Land Cruiser Heaven seat covers. So yeah, I haven't seen them in person. And they're only like an hour and a half from me, but I've never actually gone up there. And yeah, I'm really excited for the turbo install. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it should make the truck really fun to drive. I choose 70 series. Yeah, 70 series or 80 series would be my first choice. And I think regearing the transfer case is the way to go, especially if you're only going up to like 35s or whatever the metric equivalent is. You're only doing the gears in one case instead of having to pull apart both axles and the knuckles and everything to get to the differentials. And they're spur gears, not hypoid gears. So you're not doing pinion depth and backlash and everything like that. You know, you're just replacing the gears. There's no setup involved in them. And you keep the stronger factory 410 ring and pinion. You know, when you go 456, 488, 529, you know, as you go deeper in the gearing, the pinion head gets smaller. So yeah, I'm a big fan of re-gearing in the transfer case. That's my plan with my 80 because it's already got the E-locked axles. I'm going to leave the differentials alone and just do the underdrive high range and the lower low range to get it back to the, you know, close to factory when I go to bigger tires. And I don't know what you would do to make a 92 a TRD Pro. Like the 95, 97s, you could get a TRD supercharger for. I don't know what you would do on the earlier ones to make it TRD. And where to buy transfer case gears? I get mine from Cruiser Brothers, but Kurt at Cruiser Outfitters also sells them. Either one is going to be an excellent product. So I would go with whoever you prefer, but Cruiser Brothers or Cruiser Outfitters has them. And new old stock TRD supercharger or Joey's turbo kit? That is a good question. I've driven the supercharged trucks, and I really like them. I haven't driven a turbo 1FZ yet, but it's supposed to be awesome. I'm going to lean towards turbo just because of the awesomeness. But I haven't actually driven a turbo truck, so that's just a guess. I would not buy anything at all from cruiserparts.net. Everything I have ever bought from them has been a bigger pile of crap than what I was trying to replace. If you want parts that look like they drug them off the bottom of the Atlantic, go with Cruiser Parts. Yeah. I am not a fan of them at all. And I haven't heard anything about their 1FZs, but we had a customer that had a lot of problems with a 2F that had been rebuilt by them. Because I don't think they're actually rebuilding them. They had somebody like in Texas that was doing it or something weird like that. Granted, this was a couple of years ago. But yeah, they've burned me way too many times to deal with. Yeah, building diffs it's definitely one of those things that's like half science, half black art, where you just, you know, you get the feel for it. You know, it's totally doable to learn how to do them on your own. I mean, that's how I learned to do it. You know, but I went into it fully expecting to blow up a couple of diffs learning. You know, now I do, you know, all of my setup just by feel, and I usually don't break out the gauges like the dial indicator and the torque meter for pinion preload, you know, until I'm all done, just to verify that everything's good. But I've done enough of them now that you can do it by feel and, you know, be within spec when you're done. But I've been building them for, I don't know, 20-something years at this point. I don't even want to know how many gear sets I've done in Land Cruisers and mini trucks. But if you do it by the T case, there's no setup really. They just they just bolt in. I don't know that I would try changing gears in a 3FE80 for fuel economy. The cost of changing the gears, you're never going to make that up with fuel economy. And unless you're going with bigger tires, you're going to be like screaming the engine at higher RPMs on the highway. And I am not the Toyota diff wizard. Zook is the Toyota diff wizard. Yeah, that guy is a diff wizard. Oh yeah, and that I think gear installs is Zook. Yeah, he is crazy good at diffs. Like I've done a ton of diffs, but I don't think I've done anywhere near what he has. Intermittent misfire in a 96 LC seems to be related to humidity or rain and always under load. I have not. I haven't had to track that down, but usually when it's an intermittent misfire on an 80, a lot of times the first thing I look at is where the wiring harness runs back next to the EGR valve. The EGR pipe is really good for cooking the injector wires, and you'll get an intermittent short back there. But usually when it's humidity or rain related, it's in the distributor, at least on everything I've ever had. Yeah, but I've never actually had to diagnose that on a cruiser. But I would look at the wiring harness back by the EGR valve, and maybe pop the distributor cap off and see what it looks like inside. Because if the rotor and the cap are starting to get warm, humidity may play havoc with that. And yeah, we can do diffs shipped in. We've never actually had anybody ship them in, but we have plenty of local people just drop diffs off to get rebuilt. So shipping wouldn't be an issue. Awesome. Yeah, I didn't think there was a balance pin on the 80 series flywheel, but I wasn't sure because Crash usually takes those off. But yeah, we actually have one sitting on the floor at the shop right now. And I walked past it earlier and I was like, you know what? I should look and see if there's a pin in there. And then I actually didn't look. And Dave wants to know if he can take 12 volts from the starter solenoid on a 40 to run a DUI distributor. I want to say I tap into, it's the hot lead that normally goes to the igniter on a 40. It's either yellow with a black stripe or white with a black stripe. It's like an 8 gauge-ish, 10 gauge-ish wire. Okay, black and yellow. Yeah, I usually use whichever one originally fed the coil with hot, because then you know that it's hot with on and start, or run and start. A couple of the run ones turn off with start. If I remember, Scott's is like, is his an F or is it a 2F? I can't remember. His may be different. Yeah. Pull whichever wire was the original hot to the coil is the one that I usually use. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong wire as being that heavy gauge. I might be thinking of the feed wire that's coming back from the ammeter. But yeah, whichever is the one that is the feed to the coil for hot is the one that I would use. And yeah, the only other thing that I could think that might be like water humidity related would be the crank trigger. The crank sensor, it goes in like the bottom of the oil pan and then kind of runs sideways. And then there's a plug, kind of like at the block oil pan connection. That might be getting moisture in it. Yeah, and I will second Zook at gear installs. I've watched some of his videos and seen a couple of diffs he's built, and they are awesome. I would not use the pink in anything that you don't have to use it in. The pink seems to be super corrosive. It eats the seals in water pumps. It eats radiators. Like when we do the 4.7 timing belts, the trucks that come in that have the older red coolant in them, the water pump's totally fine when we take it apart. The trucks that have the pink coolant in them, the water pump is leaking every time. Like same mileage span. If you were going to do any kind of coolant upgrade, I would use the Toyota Red from like the late 90s, early 2000s. But I wouldn't use the pink in any older trucks. I think the pink is just for the newer aluminum stuff. But there's no real issue with the older green. It just doesn't last quite as long as the newer stuff. So you change it more often. But even with the green, you're probably only changing it every couple of years. And how long can you run front axle seals leaking gear oil into your front hub and bearings? It depends on the truck. Like 40, 60, 62, as long as you don't lock the hubs, indefinitely, because you're not spinning the front berths. On an 80 series with full-time four-wheel drive, you're always spinning the berth fields when you're driving. And eventually you're going to leak enough gear oil through there that you're going to wash all the berth field grease out, and you're going to end up with dry berth field joints, and you're going to wear out the axles. It's hard to say how long, because it depends on how fast it's leaking, what the condition of the grease was. Yeah, there's way too many variables. And thanks, John. I like it when people click the little money button. And to Dave, other than U-joints, what would make grinding noise on D-cell after lifting the 80? We see a lot of worn drive shaft slip joints. And, when you lift them, the drive shaft's, at a slightly different place than it was. So you could be getting a grinding noise from the drive shaft. If it's right on the cusp of like acceleration to deceleration, like as you feather the throttle, it could be pinion bearings. It's hard to say with any kind of certainty without hearing it. You should just drive by sometime and we'll listen to it. That's the easiest way to do it. Doing the front brakes, you'd be best to get new bearing or new seals. But since you just did the wheel bearings, and the knuckles, you're probably okay to reuse them. Like those seals are new enough that they'll probably be fine coming off and going back on. You probably don't have to worry about it. And the money button on my end is at the very bottom of the chat screen. Like there's a smiley face and then like a square with a dollar sign. I'm assuming that's how it works, but I've never actually clicked it. And yeah, when you come out to pick up the brakes, just grab Crasher Eye and we'll go for a spin and see if we can figure out what's making the noise. But yeah, if it's like on the highway when you've like floored it and then you're just backing off to like a happy, not coast, but light throttle, a lot of times that's pinion bearing. But we've also heard the drive shafts, like the slip joints in the drive shafts, do that then as well. Yeah, and just be easy when you pull the wheel hubs off. Don't go slamming them around, and try not to get a bunch, like put like paper towels or something in the opening when you're beating the old rotor off. That way the rusty, crusty rotor chunks don't get in the grease in the seal and in your new bearings. But yeah, you're likely fine to reuse those because it's only been a couple of months, I think, since you did the knuckles. Pinion bearing replacement is fairly crappy. Axles have to come out, or the axle shafts have to come out to get the differential out. You pull the carrier, pull the flange, knock the pinion out, new pinion bearings, crush sleeve, seal, put it all back together, set the preload on the pinion, reset backlash, and put it all back together. Wow. Steve Duncan, super awesome with the money button. You people are awesome. Shady 80 parts, here I come. Yeah, apparently back in the day, there is a factory Toyota service tool that lets you pull the outer pinion bearing with the diff all together, and you can do the pinion bearing and the crush sleeve. But I don't know how you get the preload proper doing it that way, so I never bothered looking up trying to buy the tool. You can likely wait until a locker install. It'll get progressively worse, and when it gets bad, you'll know it. When it gets real bad, the pinion bearing or the pinion seal will start dumping gear oil. And that's your cue that it really needs attention. But if it's just a minor hum, you've probably got some time. And if the onset was right when you did the lift, I would think more drive shaft slip joint or U-joint that was borderline than pinion. I've never seen Schaefer's 211. I usually use it's Valvoline. It's labeled like Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, Molly grease. It's a blue pound tub. I usually use that for the knuckles, and then I'll use, just disc brake wheel bearing grease. I like the Mobile One stuff, but half the time I can't find it locally, so I just use regular disc brake grease for the actual wheel bearings. I don't generally use the moly in the wheel bearings. It's a little bit thick. At least the stuff we use, it seems a little bit thick for wheel bearings. It's probably perfectly fine. It's labeled as okay for wheel bearings, but I generally use like disc brake wheel bearing grease for that. But for the knuckle bearings and Burfields, you want just a heavy moly grease. And awesome. I'm glad you guys are digging chat this evening. And to Dave, shaft slip joint, it's probably fixable at a drive shaft shop. They could probably cut out the slip joint and weld in a new one. We just buy a new Toyota drive shaft, and that fixes it. Because getting the slip joint fixed at the drive shaft shop, you're probably going to be at least a few $100, and then you've still got, a shaft with old ears and old U-joints in it. So we usually just go complete new Toyota shaft, even though that's rather expensive. But yeah. And remember, if you're going to do U-joints, buy them in sets of 3. 3. My pinky's not bending right. I always mangle at least one U-joint for every 2 that I successfully install. I'd love to know what rear main seal replacement would run at the Toyota dealership. I will bet it's not cheap, because I know what we would charge for it, and it's not cheap. Well, you may have better luck with U-joints than I do. 1600's not horrible. Because I would guess we're in like the 14-ish range. I'd have to do the math to be sure. But yeah, I'd bet we're somewhere 1400 for that job. It is not a fun job since the transfer case and transmission have to come out to do it. But Crash breaks a lot fewer U-joints than I do. So I may just be very unlucky with U-joints, but I always order them in sets of 3. I'm trying to think if we have a spare 80 U-joint should you need one. I don't think I do. I think I have a bunch of 40 series U-joints, and I got a couple mini truck U-joints that I found when I was cleaning out the back of the 4Runner. Yeah, rear main seal is a horrible job. Any options other than OEM U-joints? I'm trying to think. There's a Japanese brand, and I can't think of it right. It's like SANKEI, maybe. I usually get them straight from Toyota just because they seem to hold up the best. They're a bit pricier, but at this point they've done 20, 30 years worth of driving. If you're going to get a similar amount of time out of the new ones, then the Toyota U-joints aren't really that much more expensive. Like my 4Runner's got, dual cases, 4 7s, and I beat on it with factory Toyota U-joints, and I've never killed one. Matsuba, that's the other brand. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I've used Matsubas, and they're good. It's a good Japanese joint. And if I can't get them from Toyota, those are what I get, either from Cruiser Brothers or Cruiser Outfitters, because I think they also have the Matsubas. Yeah, like the parts store ones, like the Moogs and the generic house brands, they don't seem to hold up. But like the Toyota ones, super awesome. And the high-end Japanese ones, I've never seen one of those fail either. But yeah, the factory ones just last forever. I just pulled it. I had a spare set of factory U-joints for my 4Runner that had been riding around in the back of that for like 15 years. And I haven't needed one because they just hold up. I've ripped the tubes off the drive shafts, before U-joints let go. I've never actually seen 3.5 U-joints. But I use their steering joints all the time, and they're super good. So I would assume their U-joints are also good. And to answer the question on the cork gasket, your 3FE is still rocking some late 50s technology as far as gaskets go. So yeah, your oil pan gasket, timing cover gasket, and tappet cover gasket are all cork. And then when it went to the 1FZ, they got rid of that gasket altogether, and the oil pans just glue on, which is super awesome because it does not leak. But yeah, the Toyota cork gaskets actually seal fairly well, way better than the aftermarket replacement cork gaskets that are multiple pieces that you have to glue together. And T25 is very late to the show today, because I'm probably going to jump off of here in just a few minutes to start dinner and feed the dogs dinner. Yeah, 3.5 might make U-joints. And if they do, I wouldn't hesitate to run them. But I've only ever used them for tie rods. Well, thanks for stopping by to say hi. What's the best thing I ate in Portugal? I'm trying to think. What's the best thing I ate in Portugal? I had a lot of really good gelato and had a couple of good crepes. I'm not a good person to ask about eating in foreign countries because my wife and I are both vegetarian. So we didn't partake in, like the Portuguese are known for seafood, and we didn't eat any of the seafood. My favorite thing over there was the Summersby cider. They had apple, blackberry, and something else. And it was super good. You know what we did? We went to a tapas bar one night, and I had Papas Bravas and something else. And those were really good. Like, that was a really expensive night when we went to the tapas joint. But it was like the best meal we had there. We just basically got like just a ton of, we got everything that was vegetarian on the menu and just ate all of it. It was really good. So, about writing the book. I got like the first chapter, maybe 2 chapters written, and then totally stopped writing it. I guess technically it's still in the pipeline. We've gotten so busy with other stuff at the shop that yeah, it's on the back burner right now. And favorite coffee is definitely Guatemalan. Especially Antigua, Guatemala coffee. Super awesome. But I will drink pretty much anything South Central American. But yeah, definitely Guatemalan's the favorite. AC not as effective at idle. At 100-degree ambient temp. If it's 100 degrees out, I wouldn't expect to have great AC, especially if it's in an older cruiser, simply because you're not spinning the compressor fast enough to build the pressures you need to cool. Like a lot of times when we're charging AC, I'll have to rev it to 2500 to get it to pull off my charge tank. At idle, it won't pull the last little bit of refrigerant in just because the pressures aren't flowing enough. And yes, I did actually make an outline first. I'm using Scrivener. And so like all the outlines are done. All the notes of what I want to write are done. And there's a lot of blurbs. But it's the actual prose part of the writing I have not been doing great at. And to Brian, the other side of the shop is slowly getting set up. I just put a lift in on Friday. I've got to wire it yet. There was a 220 plug on that side of the shop, so I thought I was good to go. But that plug only has 110, so I traced it back to the sub panel. That sub panel's wired wrong and only has 110. So I've got to I got to pull 220 over from the main panel, which I bought all the wiring over the weekend. I just haven't done it yet, but I gotta wire 220 over there, and we need to get shelving up so we can organize a lot of it. But we're using it. Like we pulled a motor out over there today. And yes, we are back to Tuesdays. The local running series ended last week, and I don't think it picks back up until October. And I think they were saying the October one is going to be on Sundays. So yeah, we're back to Tuesdays for the foreseeable future. And yes, once I get the new side cleaned up and everything's organized and where it should be, I'm going to do a new shop tour video. Right now, it looks like a bomb went off in the shop because we've got stuff moved around and half here and half there while we're figuring out where we're going to put everything. But yeah, new tour is coming soon. And yeah, on an 80 series, yeah, I wouldn't expect awesome AC at idle. Like even my newer Subaru at idle, it doesn't do a whole lot on the AC side of things. It gets rather toasty until I'm moving down the highway again. Because I think it's more compressor speed than it is air speed through the condenser that's killing you. I could be wrong. Yes. Good luck to you with the book as well. I had all these great intentions of getting this book written, and I have not done well at it. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the evening. The dogs are pacing behind me, waiting for dinner. But thanks for everybody that tuned in this evening. And super awesome thank you to everybody that donated during chat this evening. That was amazing, because I always forget that function is even there because nobody ever uses it. But yeah, I'll be back next Tuesday if you have any questions. Oh, and I just want to brain it again. But yeah, thanks to everybody that tuned in. Thanks to everybody that subscribed. If you're not subscribed, subscribe below. It always helps out. And yeah, I should make a tools video too. That is an excellent idea. So yeah, I will catch you guys next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in and subscribe. I'll see you next week.